Hello and welcome. This is From Day One, and welcome to our webinar, How to Manage Employee Health and Well-Being During Stressful Times. Please join us in welcoming our host, From Day One co-founder and Chief Content Officer, Steve Kep.
Hi, everyone. This is From Day One, our forum on corporate values. Welcome to our webinar, in which we'll be exploring a pressing topic, how to manage employee health and well-being during stressful times. In our current series of webinars, we've looked at how to manage a remote workforce, explored what our companies may look like in the near future. We've also talked about what makes a company a great place to work for, especially now. Today, we're looking at ensuring the health and psychological safety of our employees. Right now, workers are adapting as fast as they can. If they're frontline workers, they're telling their bosses in no uncertain terms what they need to get the job done and ensure the safety of themselves and their families. If they're working from home, they're adapting to working without physical interaction with their colleagues. And before long, they'll need to adjust all over again to going back to workplaces that will look and feel much different from what they remember. People are remarkably adaptable and resilient, but stress and disorientation take their toll. Employers need to stay in touch with how their workers are doing, know the signs of strain, and respond in a timely manner. What new benefits, work procedures, and managerial insights must we prioritize? Before we dive into the answers, we'd like to thank our partners, Kintone, Speakfully, and Gympass, for making today's webinar possible. I'll tell you a little bit about each one. Kintone is a teamwork platform with a visual application builder that enables organizations to effectively manage their data and workflows for better collaboration. More than 14,000 companies and nonprofits worldwide have built and deployed over 1 million applications on Kintone. Speakfully is a documentation and reporting platform that provides teams with real-time data on incidents and cultural trends within the workplace. Speakfully grants employees a secure place to document their own negative experiences at work, anything from unfairly or discriminatorily being passed over for a raise to instances of harassment. Speakfully gives HR staff the information they need to combat workplace mistreatment. Our third partner is Gympass, which attracts new untapped users to fitness facilities by partnering with corporations to empower employees to become more physically active. They've expanded to 14 countries, becoming the world's largest corporate fitness solution with more than 2,000 corporate partners and 50,000 fitness partners globally. Thanks to those partners. A quick list of logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event, simply using your registration email. You can watch for a written account of the conversation next week on our website at fromdayone.co. At 3 p.m., we'll have a Q&A session, so please submit your questions around that time using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator, the business journalist Lydia Dishman, who reports for Fast Company on tech and leadership and has written for CBS, Money Watch, Fortune, and the New York Times, among others. So Lydia, over to you.
Thank you so much, Steve. Got the unmute thing going on, right? I am delighted to be a part of this, another discussion From Day One, and I am delighted also to welcome my stellar panelists today. And as Steve said, I am Lydia Dishman. I am a reporter and editor with Fast Company. I've been covering workplace issues and culture for a number of years now, and there's always been some rumblings about how to make culture work, especially when a company gets acquired or you're making a startup into a larger organization, but we've never quite been at the juncture that we are at now, where all of our teams or most of our teams are working remotely, and many people don't have the experience of working from their homes and having the challenges of having their families around along with them for the ride. So well-being is taking on a whole new meaning. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our panelists. I'd like you each to introduce yourselves very briefly, tell us about your work and your own experience over the past couple of months. I think most of us have been at this for nearly 2 months, if not 2 solid months. What do you do specifically to maintain your own health and well-being? So let's start with Donna, and we'll go from there.
Great. Thanks, Lydia, Steve, and great to be here with our panelists and with you all. So hi, I'm Donna Yonchak. I'm actually the Senior Director of Talent and Culture at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that's state government. Joined the Commonwealth about 2 years ago, and in my role, I oversee talent needs and opportunities and strategies for about 43,000 of the Commonwealth's executive department employees. And as you can imagine, the Commonwealth and state agencies are not always the first adopters of technology. So it's been a pretty amazing experience for us to see going from maybe a 2 or 1% teleworking population to going to almost 50%. So that's just a little bit of background. And Lydia, it's a great question about taking care of myself. We've, you know, work has been really busy because I'm also helping out with some of our unemployment application stuff that's going on, which, as you all can imagine, is overwhelming the unemployment systems around the country. So I haven't been doing a lot other than grabbing some time to walk with my dog and my husband in the mornings and in the evenings, but really have it on my agenda to not only preach the cause of taking care of yourself and taking care of team members, but actually acting on it too. So thanks.
Luciana, why don't you take it next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Luciana Duarte, and I'm responsible for the employee experience at HP. And so that's 55,000 employees worldwide that my team and I are responsible for making sure that they're having a great experience. And that includes from a culture standpoint, employee communications, employee engagement, and social impact, and the change management that we oversee for them. So we've been a little busy over the past few weeks, and you know, for us it really went all the way back to January when we first started handling the situation as it was evolving in China, so it's been intense. But you know, we'll talk through what we've been doing and what we've been learning throughout this time. And for me personally, somehow the thing that has worked the best for me and my husband, we don't have children, which helps because we can each just focus on our work. He commandeered the office, and so I'm sitting at my dining room table, as you can probably see from my background. But what we've been doing is we've been doing a Bond movie marathon. So we are into the 12th movie right now, so that's about halfway through. And what really seems to help us about that is that James Bond is always in a really tough situation, but he always gets out alive. So that has been very inspirational for us.
Inspirational and sanity inducing, I suppose. A lot of people are binge watching a lot of different kinds of series. Sue, why don't you take it next? You need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Sorry, I know. I have a dog, so I just didn't want his barking to disturb. But yeah, so I'm Sue Choi. I'm the commissioner for the City of Chicago's Department of Human Resources. We have a workforce of approximately 35,000 employees. A large chunk of that is public safety. So we've kind of got these two sections. We've got, obviously, we've got part of our workforce that has to be out there. And then we've got obviously an administrative side that we've really had to make a lot of really fast adjustments. And so I know we'll get into all those details, you know, soon. I mean, personally, so I have kids, and with school being out, it's been a challenge because I have no teaching experience whatsoever. So it's been interesting to figure out how to get your kids to do work, but you know, we're getting through it. But you know, we also just we do what, a lot of people do. We try to get outside when the weather's nice. Chicago right now is kind of, has had a couple really nice days. We had, the dog. And then, we've been obviously been on, been watching TV. My kids are 8, my boy-girl twins. And so, what's kind of been fun is I've been trying to introduce them to some of the movies that I loved when I was a kid around, that's, appropriate for them and try to, and, they're just totally it's just so different from what they're used to. But, and it's just, so we just kind of do our best to relax, and try to, I try not to take the school thing too seriously. I mean, in a sense that we do our best, but make sure that we're doing fun things like, cooking or projects, and just making sure that, we're trying to have, we have fun. And so anyway, that's kind of what we're up to.
I think key there is to not sweat what you're not getting done. And I keep hearing that over and over, is that you really have to just relax the control. Marion, I'm going to turn it over to you, even though we cannot see you. We can see your name popped up on the screen, so please feel free.
Well, thank you. I apologize that we're still working on it on the back end to see if we can get the camera to turn on. But I'm Marian Brooks. I'm the Vice President and U.S. Country Head of Diversity and Inclusion for Novartis Pharmaceuticals. In my role, I'm responsible for setting the strategy as well as execution plan for all divisions of Novartis around how we infuse diversity and inclusion into everything we do. In the business versus diversity and inclusion being on the left and the business on the right. My job is to help infuse it and to work with our business leaders to ensure that we have clear strategies and plans around all aspects of diversity and inclusion, from scouting and recruiting to employee resource groups to connectivity with other organizations and things. So for me, what I've been doing to stay focused, so I travel the majority of the time. So I live in Los Angeles and I've been here for 2.5 years, and now I've been home for 8 weeks. I typically am home for 1 or 2 weeks a month. So it's been a huge adjustment for me. So a couple of the things that I've been doing is trying to mix up my workout routine. So at the beginning of the week, I write out how many days I plan to work out that week. So if it's going to be 4 days, 5 days, or 3 days, I make an intention of what I want to do that week. And then I change it up. So I've been doing virtual yoga, which I've never done before. I bought a bike. And it's the first time since I was a kid that I've owned a bike. And so now I go out at least 2 days a week and I ride the bike. It's a good way to continue social distancing, but get some different level of exercise. So I've been mixing my workouts and exercise up, and it actually gives me something to look forward to during the week, because our brains as humans is always focused on planning. We always have to have a plan, or we're looking towards the future. So it gives me something to keep me in a good frame of mind.
That's so important, especially because we really don't know and can't say when any of this is going to end. So the little bit of planning that we can do seems like a real win. Dave, last but not least, why don't you tell us a little bit about your company and what you're doing to stay sane?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lydia. Dave Landa, I'm the CEO of Kintone Corporation. And as just mentioned, Kintone's a no-code software platform that lets anyone create custom solutions to manage their business operations and team collaboration, essentially from anywhere, anytime. Our parent company is actually a global public company based in Tokyo. It's pretty renowned for its progressive values and culture. And for about a decade now, it's had a guiding HR principle of 100 different people have 100 different work styles. And it really celebrates and supports work style diversity. I'm also a member of the company's global organizational strategy office, which focuses on developing teamwork culture internally, but then also sharing some of the activities, some of the methods, and the principles externally as well that our organization has developed over the years. Although we have as a company have supported and encouraged remote work since our inception here in the US, I'm actually someone who goes into the office or went into the office about 95% of the time. So I liked, seeing the team that was there and being there for them. So for me, it was a pretty big transition. I moved, I guess it's been about, since March 5th, we were pretty early on the going remote. So for 2 months, I've been at home. I'm a father with 2 teenage sons who are also suddenly at home all day, every day, which, as you could guess, is a bit of a challenge. I'm very fortunate, though, that my wife is a full-time, amazing mom. So her hard work has certainly been very much on display and very greatly appreciated through this time. In terms of my own well-being, I've been really, it's worked out quite well in that I've been really focused on exercising with my sons. So they're both pretty athletic, and they traditionally have gone and done their sports and had their practices and did all their exercising on their own. But this period has let us actually reconnect and go jogging together and play basketball out in the driveway and kind of work out in the garage together. And that connection actually has been really fortunate for me. I think my older son in particular, 15, freshman in high school, was kind of moving into that friend-centric world. And this has been kind of a really appreciated reprieve in a way to reconnect a little bit with him. So that's really been good, both emotionally and physically for me. So
it's amazing. I think that a lot of families are having a similar experience in that this quarantine has sort of forced bonding, and you have to relearn how to live together. But flipping it back over to the workplace, now we have to relearn how not to be with the people that we've seen all the time. And this is a question for all of you, so you can all take turns on this one. The majority of you work for very large organizations, thousands of employees. Were there any metrics in place before the pandemic that guided managers and leaders of teams to sort of take the temperature of their staff's well-being? And if so, or not, how has that changed now that you have all of these distributed teams? Who wants to take that one first? Otherwise, I will have to.
Lydia, if you'd like. Yeah.
I could quickly. For in our case, so we have historically done internal NPS surveys on a monthly basis, just to gauge how people are feeling about the company in general. But we encourage comments on those surveys, and those had been a way to kind of see and maybe gauge or have some indication of how folks are doing. The other thing we've always done is myself and our leadership team always start our one-on-ones very intentionally with, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Again, to try to gauge that. So it's not really a metric, but it's a policy that we try to deploy across the board to help draw out, if there's issues at an individual level. Just recently we did send out a new survey around dealing with COVID-19 and work from home scenario that did address both sort of physical office preparation for work from home, as well as any emotional or mental issues. And those are things we're only just now kind of, going through and determining, how can we react? What sort of resources can we offer? And we're very much about individualizing things. So as you can tell, 100 different work styles, from 100 different people. So we're doing the same thing with this, like trying to understand individual needs and challenges and see if our leadership team can respond accordingly. So that's kind of where we're at. So not like overall metrics, but much more individualized is our approach.
Well, I have to believe that this is, it's a tricky subject anyway, and I'm going to turn this over to Marion because I feel like there are better ways than others to ask these questions to make people feel included, and inclusivity has never been more important than now because we are so far apart from each other. So Marion, why don't you talk a little bit about what Novartis is doing?
So yeah, so we've had a number of opportunities and things that we tap into on a regular basis to understand where people are and what they need. We have our quarterly surveys. We also have a number of town halls that we've been doing prior to this, and now we've actually ramped those up a little bit more. But another innovative thing is like our coffee chats and dinner chats, where people are able to buy food, get together on the webcam together, talk about what they're eating, and then talk about challenges or the things that they're doing to overcome challenges or how they're supporting other people. So those things have been very informal, but very insightful for the leadership team as far as where people are and how we can continue to support them. We also have always offered a number of resources from counseling and coaching and things of that sort for our employees. So we're really highlighting a lot of the resources that are already available and even expanding some of them. So some of the work from home situations that people have, if you're taking care of small children or an elderly parent, you might not be able to work the hours that you would normally work or that everyone else is working right now. So we've added a level of flexibility there, as well as if you need to take off during this time period, we're giving some paid leave during this time period for people in those types of situations as well. So really just trying to meet people where they are and provide the additional support and resources that they need.
Luciana, we had talked earlier about the chicken calls, which you don't need to go into detail about that, but more what I'm curious to know while we're talking about how we measure the health and well-being of a team, what specific questions are you asking when you do check in with them?
Sure. Yeah. So we actually do. So the chicken calls, just to address that. So that's just on my own team of 30 people. But we do what we call check-in calls. But when you say that fast, it starts to sound like chicken calls. And so they affectionately became known as the chicken calls because it was just us chickens. But that's just a micro example of something that we do on a regular basis to stay connected to each other. But more broadly, for the 55,000 employees of HP, we absolutely do measure their health and well-being on a regular basis, and we've ramped that up in the more recent months. So well-being apps, we have things like Virgin Pulse, that we track well-being through usage of the various different programs that we offer from a benefit standpoint. Our employee assistance program, we have an employee relief fund. So we keep track of how all of those things are being used over any given period of time, but especially now we're being even more mindful and making sure that we're promoting the things that aren't getting used so that people are aware that they're available. But one thing that we've done that has really helped us is we have instituted our Quick Clicks survey. And so the idea is that every month we send out a survey of approximately 5 questions, no more than 7. No fewer than 3. And in these last few months, what we've seen is that has just given us such great insight into how people are feeling because, and we'll tweak the questions a bit. They actually change month over month, but sometimes we bring back a question that we had before. And so one of the questions that we ask regularly is, the great place to work question. You guys might be familiar with that, right? So taking everything into account, HP is a great place to work. And what we've seen is that there has been an uptick in that in the response, the agreement with that question. Just in the last month, that went up 4 percentage points, which is very significant for a 1-month difference, especially a month that has been so challenging for so many of us. So in addition to that question, we've added some more COVID-19 specific questions. The one that has really stood out to me because because it's related to this item of well-being, is HP looks after the well-being of its employees. That response was a 95% agreement rate in this last month. So, I think, and all the other questions that we asked were also in the 90s. But what that's really giving us is insight into how supported people are feeling. And it's really helping us to be able to identify. So in the pockets where we don't see that level of agreement, why is that? And so that we can go and address the issues.
So talk about it from the perspective of a massive city organization. I wasn't sure if you were saying that there was just a hiring freeze but no layoffs. And I got to believe that if people feel like their jobs are safe, then their emotional safety goes along with that. So
definitely. The mayor made an official announcement that, questions always come up about what's going to happen with the budget, and acknowledging we're going to have, different challenges this year. She made it clear layoffs are not part of the plan. And so I think, having her officially say that in the press and make that clear has really, helped people have a better state of mind. I mean, in terms of metrics, we were actually in the process of finalizing a survey to kind of assess various different aspects of people's opinions and feelings about the workplace. And it ranges from everything from, do people feel like if they need additional training, are they getting it? Do they feel that they're being listened to by their managers? We've talked, questions relating to diversity and inclusion. We're also in the process of, I'm sure we'll resume it once we're back, in the office, developing employee resource groups so that people can, really kind of get together and talk about very specific issues. The other it's not really a metric, but one of the things that my department handles is the EEO aspect. So we enforce the policy, receive complaints, and obviously some of those complaints result in investigations. But a lot of the complaints don't rise to the level of a policy violation. It's not violating law, but it's clearly showing that there's a problem. Like something is going on in a particular area, office or division. Like there's something that's making people unhappy. So what we do is we make sure the department head, because we let them know. We tell them, this is not, we're not talking about, recommending discipline for someone, but we're telling you that this is what we're hearing is happening in your department. And asking them, actually, we've started asking them to respond to us in writing, like what did they do in response to that? Because I think a lot of times what we see are these complaints that sort of, are on the border of a problem, but if addressed, would prevent and improve the workplace. So that was the other thing that we were using as a tool. To assess, people's sort of, feelings in the workplace. So that's kind of what, that's where we're at.
So Donna, again, last but not least, so sorry we have to make the rounds to everyone. Tell us if there were any metrics, how those might have changed, and more specifically, what types of questions you're asking to check in with.
Yeah, so we don't currently have a really formal approach to this, but it's something that over the last 2 years, we've certainly been thinking a lot about engagement surveys, pulse surveys, and in fact, I think like others, we were poised to do some of those, or at least pursue doing more of those before COVID hit. So I think what has been striking for us is because we are a more traditional employer, right, state government, and because our workforce had not been typically deployed in a remote environment, that is a new game for everybody. It's a new game for managers. It's a new game for employees. You know, technologically, we weren't really, we weren't really equipped when COVID hit. And so the fact that everyone has had to really turn quickly and find a way to be productive, to determine like what the Maslow's hierarchy of needs are in terms of, you know, keeping both a productive and healthy workforce, you know, and what that means in, you know, such a dramatic shift to a distributed workplace. We've been trying to leverage a lot of learning tools. So, you know, in some cases, our workforce, because there's a large contingent, about half of Massachusetts state government is related to healthcare. A lot of our employees and public safety, a lot of our employees are right on the front line. For those who are not on the front line, we're redistributing work. We're, you know, moving people if their jobs are shifting or changing, or, you know, need to change because of the situation. We're moving them around and being able to use learning platforms, virtual learning, some of the tools that we have, even getting things like, you know, we were talking about, can we move through some of our compliance training in a time where people may have more time available, but balancing that too with the sensitivity of where people's mindsets are, right? So we don't want to necessarily overload people with like, hey, you can learn this, and hey, you can upskill here. But we do want to try to find that balance. And that's what we've been working on most recently is, you know, kind of making sure that the technology needs more or less are where people need them to be. And it's great timing right now for this session, because we're moving into the, okay, so we've kind of got the tech stuff settled out, not completely, but, you know, on average. Now we really need to address the people in the human part, you know, which is that emotional, you know, the emotional aspect of this for even those who have, you know, comfortable working from home, love working from home. I'm, you know, a believer, and I'm super productive here. I know a lot of my team members are too. It's a very different space not having the option, right, to connect with people and be with people. So now we're trying to find, again, resources that we can use, leveraging things that our colleagues in the facilities world have put together, or people in health and human services have put together, and trying to make all those resources available to people as assets for learning, for balance, and to, you know, make it through what is a really difficult time.
So I want to just pause for a moment for a station identification from Steve, because we're at the midway point.
Hi again. I'd just like to remind anyone joining our webinar in midstream that we're from day one exploring how to manage employee health and well-being during stressful times. Our sponsors are Kintone, Speakfully, and Gympass. As a reminder, start getting your questions ready for about 3 p.m. when we'll begin our Q&A session. We've got a bunch of them already. Now back to you, Lydia.
Thank you. And yes, the questions are coming in. Some of them I am hoping to address before we get to the hour mark, but something that I am hearing all of you saying in some form or fashion is that you're trying to be respectful of people's work-life balance. And I believe that a survey came out last week that indicated that we are actually working longer hours, because with the lack of commute time, then it's just easy to roll up to your workspace, such as it is, and just get going. And so I want to ask you, it's obviously going to be very unique for each different company, but what are you doing, particularly with your teams day to day, to encourage them to find that balance and to let them know that it's okay to take a little bit of time off and, you know, step back or not do the training or, you know, something else like that?
This is Marion. I'll jump in. So one of the things that we've been doing is encouraging people to take some time off. So I actually led. So we asked some senior leaders if they would lead by example. So this week I took off Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday just to decompress, because as you said, we're working much longer hours now because it's, you know, constant around the clock, and people are getting burnt out or saying I'm busier now than I was before. So we're encouraging people to take some time off. The other thing that we're doing is trying to block the day as much as possible. Let's start at 9 o'clock, let's end at 4:30, no meetings during the lunch hour. So we're making those types of recommendations to our teams and leaders, and then trying to lead by example by, you know, self-care. It's hard to tell other people to do what you're not doing. So the leading by example, I think, is critically important for leaders.
I can
Absolutely. Dave, your box list.
kind of what Marion's saying. We're kind of in a fortunate position in that our platform does actually support remote work. So we haven't had to have those difficult conversations around layoffs. It's been the opposite. You know, we've been actually hiring people, so figuring out remote onboarding has been an issue. And then this question of, you know, people are significantly more busy now, actually. And so we really are running into this issue of concern about burnout and people working long hours. Actually, I mentioned the NPS a moment ago. One of the comments, you know, in that was one of our people saying, you know, I'm not able to turn it off effectively. You know, it's really becoming stressful for me. And so it is an issue. You know, we have been, to Marion's point, we've actually encouraged, you know, folks to make sure they take their PTO. If you're not going anywhere, it's easy to forget that's even an option, right? So we have been doing that, encouraging the PTO. We have also had our own internal sessions, sort of webinar sessions about how we can best manage at home and turn things off. The calendaring has been a big one, blocking time before and after your weekday schedule so that meetings aren't scheduled there. I actually did a poll of our team members to get some of their feedback and some of their best practices around managing their time at home. And in particular, parents ended up writing a blog about it and an article on LinkedIn about work from home parenting. And some of the things, again, using your calendar to block out time, even if it's midday, to have time with the family or to do things to get out and refresh and re-energize and then come back, were really, really key parts of that. And so, you know, it's communication, sharing, encouraging folks to be very transparent if they're having issues with being able to turn it off, and then trying to provide the types of resources, ideas, and if even policies to try to make that, you know, a better experience for folks.
Yeah, we're in a similar boat, if I may add. So we are trying to lead by example as well, and then also celebrating the examples, right? That are inspirational for people. So a few specific things that we've done, because I know those always help. So every year we have a wellness challenge, and there was some discussion about, well, should we do it the same way this year? We said, yeah, now this year more than ever, right? We need to get people out of the house, and we need to get people to stay fit and active. And so one of the things that our leaders say all the time, including our head of HR, is, oh, I got to go get my steps in, you know? And so that will be sort of like a code for, I'm gonna step out away for a while. And actually some people even do calls as they're walking around, and that's totally acceptable. You know, understood that that's just a part of our new reality. So I think a large part of it for us has just been, you know, to be human and to be honest with each other, and to, you know, be authentic, and just kind of say what it is, right? I'm going to go do this now because, you know, I have kids. I'm going to go pay attention to them for a few hours. And then the other thing that we've been doing to that extent is we've been supporting parents in particular. So we actually, So we're doing activities for parents and kids to do together. We actually we have a partnership with DreamWorks, so we've been like live streaming stuff for kids. We have been we've offered homeschooling seminars for parents, people who all of a sudden were thrust into this situation, like you said you were, Sue. You know, so we actually assembled a panel of teachers, and then one of them was actually a mom who already was homeschooling her kids, and so is very well versed in how that goes. And we had a really great discussion to help people to understand what options they had, and you know, maybe give them some practical tips. It was very well attended, and you know, people really asked a lot of questions and got a lot of value from it. Now we're starting a homework club, and so we're asking people who are interested to offer their time to tutor employees, you know, in different languages in particular. And we're matching them up with kids who need tutoring in different areas. So, you know, we're looking into what we can do for the summer if kids end up not being able to go to camp. So we're doing all those kinds of things to try to understand. This is because we're hearing from the listening that we're doing, right, from the surveys, we're hearing what the pain points are, and then we're trying to address those pain points with some specific measures to help.
Let me spin this question slightly, because I want to have Sue and Donna answer. If you're seeing these type of changes, if you're making these type of allowances with your teams and with the workforce in general, do you think that the benefits are going to change, or that even the policies themselves for getting stuff done and metrics are going to change post-COVID if we ever get there?
Yeah, so maybe I can start, and then Sue can jump in. So I think there's, might have mentioned at the beginning of our call, you know, I sort of feel like we're not going to be, you know, the end is actually going to be a new beginning, and just there's a new normal that we're going to come back to. We're certainly thinking a lot, and Governor Baker here in Massachusetts is thinking a lot about that, you know, in terms of what is return to work. He's actually put a, I think it's return to work advisory group together that's made up of public health officials, community leaders, and business leaders, small coalition, 18 to 20 people, to really think about what that like back to work is going to look like. The head of our agency, which is the Human Resources Division for the Commonwealth, is also talking about like what is a new normal. You know, now that we've gotten to a 50% mark of teleworking, you know, what are the implications of that for going back? Like, who really needs to go back? I mean, some people do, you know, certainly there are 24/7 healthcare facilities where, you know, the way that, you know, things are done are not necessarily easy to change. You know, people still have to get around on public transit, but there are a number of jobs, you know, employment profiles, agencies, secretariats, which are like business units in our world, that have a whole new way that they can operate. So there's a lot of innovative thinking going on right now, where folks who may have thought, leaders who may have thought, no, you know, state government can't go, you know, remote workforce, like can't do it, can't be done, not effective, not productive, that are now looking at a very productive workforce, right? That's getting stuff done and innovating and thinking about how we do things differently. And if we can't, you know, solve something over here, then we're going to figure out and get a group together to solve it over here. So I think that it can't, I think any company or organization that is truly steeped in reality right now can't continue work in the way that we did before March. Like, it's just not going to happen. So we have to be creative, right? We have to be innovative. We have to be thoughtful about not only the work and the productivity, but the people, right? The humans that we all are, and figure out how we do this going forward.
So,
I mean, okay, so, yeah, I echo a lot of, I mean, I know Dana, like we're in a similar situation where, I mean, working from home was like just, it was only granted as an accommodation, you know, as a reasonable accommodation for people. So it's happening very rarely. And a couple of years ago, I remember I tried to, you know, at least say, why don't we at least start at you know, some level, high levels of administrative or certain types of positions. Let's try the teleworking thing, because I think we need to move into the modern age. The response is unfortunately with the city, the public's perception of, and this is probably something that's true of all government workers, is that government workers aren't hardworking, and there's this, there's always these, yes, you have a couple bad apples that abuse, whatever privileges they have. But, I've always felt strongly that we needed to at least start looking into this, because we have a lot of people with young kids where, they just, they can work from home. Like they could work from home, and why should they have to take a sick day if they can be productive? And there are a lot of other reasons why someone may want to work from home. And so, I think what I'm hoping this, this period of time will do is, establish a certain level of trust, within, with the mayor's office and higher ups, that, that people actually can work from home and are actually going to work, be productive. I just think that we need more, I felt like we've needed more flexibility. It's just something that I think makes the workplace better. And so my hope is that one positive change that comes out of this is that we do rethink some of, the really strict ways we've done things in the past. And, in terms of, my team, I'm just really lucky to have really great managers. And so, certain divisions are not as busy as others. And so, what I'm seeing is when someone's really stepped up and, done a great job, I'm getting emails that, really are praising the work of particular employees, so that, they're being, they're appreciated and they're being recognized. And so I think that's been a really good positive. We've always done that to some degree, but I think even more now than ever, we've been wanting, managers have really been wanting to communicate when, their team has been doing a great job. And so I think that's been a positive aspect. And I've always, in general, I tend to be a pretty flexible manager in my own sense. So, I think when it comes to this new world, we don't have to put, I'm not, certain things, it's like, okay, we need to get this done, but we have time. Things are slow in certain areas. So, we don't, if we need to push meetings back, or, let's keep these meetings short. Like, let's do them in half an hour increments, so that we're not like sitting on, for hours, and trying to just, make it manageable, I think has been also, really helpful. So.
And Lydia, I was wondering if I could add a little something to that too.
Sure, go ahead.
To just build on what Sue was saying. So, prior to this new teleworking world that we're in, we actually had a small group that was working on a teleworking, kind of like a skunk works project, right? Just getting some things in place, pulling research together, really making the case, building the business case for why teleworking could work in state government. And the questions that we were asking, and not we, but collectively leadership was asking, was, well, how do you performance manage remotely? And it's like, well, how do you performance manage in the office? Like, that's not going to change whether you're remote or whether you're sitting in front of someone. So, you know what? If there's an issue with how you performance manage someone, it probably has nothing to do with where you are geographically. It has to do with your skills as a leader and as a manager, or things like, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
And so, some of those things, or like, oh, we have to have strict guidelines, like we were talking before the session started today about, you can't have, children, you can't plan to do dependent care when you're teleworking, boom, 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 like policy. And now people are like, okay, my husband walks by, or so the dog barks, or, someone's kid, it kind of almost gets us to this human level of we're all in the same place, we're getting the work done. And I think now the question that I'm hearing a lot about, which builds off of something you said, Sue, which is that productivity piece.
Yes.
And so I think for those who are still skeptics, we're looking for those productivity success stories. So I'm really curious about whether the panelists here or, you folks out in the audience have like a way to think about collecting those, again, thinking about building a business case. How do you collect those stories of productivity that allow us to push this, productive teleworking workforce together where it makes sense, where it's relevant going forward?
And Dane, I just also wanted to, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I feel like, if you're a good manager, then and you have a team, you should be able to know if your employees are doing their work, and whether it's in the office or out of the office. I mean, it's, people have a job, they have a certain amount of work they're expected to do, and are they getting it done or not? And if you can get it done at home, then, why not let that be an option when it's needed? Because I agree. I mean, if you can't, if the complaint is that you can't, you doubt that someone can manage an employee's productivity, remotely, it's the same problem in the office. So, I just think that's a great point.
Yeah. So this is Marion. I just wanted to jump in real quick on something that we've been doing at Novartis. So we were already on the journey, what we call activity-based working, where we're getting rid of offices, even desks, where people will come in and they will move around to different stations that are open. So that was a journey we were already on. And now that COVID has come into play, we're actually looking at how we even enhance that more, but also how do we make sure from a safety perspective? So think about all these shared spaces now. How do we make sure from a safety and cleanliness lens? But I agree with you guys. If you can't manage the team remotely, you can't manage the team in person very well. And so our whole motto is we want to be tied to results, not desks. And so I think if you have that mindset and really evaluate the output, you'll be able to do this successfully.
Can I make one last point, Lydia, before moving on? I just want to, just a quick anecdote to Donna's comment about interruptions. On the article I wrote, it's kind of 7 tips. The last tip was embrace interruptions. And we actually encourage, like, if you have a toddler who walks in to the meeting, have them say hello, right? It'll take a couple seconds. Everybody smiles. Everybody has a more positive experience rather than saying like, get away, move. Embrace that. It actually improves, I think, people's feeling of well-being and encouraging that family interaction, because there's nothing else you can do about it. And it actually creates a better feeling for the team we've found. So just wanted to make that point.
I think that you're all making a similar point in that the most success is found when you are encouraging well-being through trust and empathy. And the way to successfully have remote teams is by trusting them and being empathetic to everyone's unique situations. That's what I keep hearing bubbling up. So with that, we are getting many questions from our rather sizable audience. So I want to make sure that we can get to as many of those as possible. So I am going to start going through those and we can take them one at a time. One that I thought was interesting is from Tabitha. Are you measuring or reviewing employee positions that should continue to work remotely versus returning back to the normal routine? So if one of you wants to take that one.
Yeah, we definitely are, Tabitha. We at HP, we are absolutely considering the fact that we were all kind of inadvertently moved to this new teleworking situation. Actually, not all, but 90% plus. And one of the things that we asked employees in one of those surveys was, how's this working out for you? And many of them said, this is actually working out really well. And so what we want to do is we want to learn from that, and we want to be able to support more of that kind of work for those who can do it remotely into the future. And also because I think this is going to be with us for some time. And so for those roles that have to be in the office, it's actually safer if the roles that don't have to be in the office don't come in, right? Because then you reduce the overall population that's going into the site. And so it's sort of a win-win, right? Because if it's working effectively for people to be home, at least, a large percentage of their time, then that will also keep the employees that have to go back in safer. So it's absolutely something that we're learning from very quickly, and that we're discussing with leadership so that we can enable that to happen.
Is anyone else making allowances or plans?
I would say that it's been a very it's a learning experience. We've learned so much about what kinds of positions work better in terms of teleworking. And I mean, the city is so much of a service oriented entity that that we don't have a ton of room for, like, say, I don't foresee us finding identifying positions where people can telework like permanently, but ones where people are able to do that though periodically. And whether it's by need, I mean, and actually it just made me think about before I had years ago when I was I was practicing law in a law firm, and they actually encouraged people to work from home if they just sort of felt like they just felt burnt out from being in the office. And I remember liking the balance of being able to take a day or two and work from home and get my stuff done, but then missing, the camaraderie of my colleagues, and being, going back to work and having that flexibility. And so I think, there's so many different reasons why teleworking is important. And so for us, it's really being able to see, and we're analyzing, what positions does this make sense for? And I think I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue building on that, and letting, like I said, entering a new world. So.
Yeah, Sue, I'd piggyback on that too. We're doing a lot of conversation now around what roles are essential to be in the office, like what does essential mean? And one of our facilities leaders was saying, hey, let's be real about our workspace too. We can all talk about hoteling and how great it is, but the fact that our facilities are not really set up for safe hoteling in the age of COVID is something that we're not all going to be able to do, like at the drop of a hat. So having some realistic expectations about the planning that's involved, and our employees are asking, like, are we all going to have to wear masks? Are we going to do shifts? So I think there's a lot of assessment going on for, how do we take the learnings from this period, apply it in a way that maybe decreases the footprint to some degree, which also, saves us some real estate investment. But these are conversations that are going to evolve over time too. I mean, they're big decisions for any of our organizations, but definitely something that we're doing having a lot of conversations around. I'm sure you guys are too.
Yeah, I'd just say one thing for us, because we had already been pretty remote work friendly and had policies and tools in place to do it. Kind of paradoxically, what we're finding out are the sort of projects and the people and the groups who are really craving to get back into the office and be, working together in person, even if they don't necessarily have to by the nature of the work. It's almost these desires are starting to come back, and you can recognize certain, again, projects and workflows that in-person collaboration can really be meaningful and helpful. So in a paradoxical way, we're finding out a little bit more about what we might be able to do better in person. So.
I want to move on to two questions that are fairly similar. One from Jennifer saying, other than leading by example from senior leaders, how are your companies encouraging people to take PTO? And then Lisa said, how do you recommend addressing taking time off with employees who would rather work a flexible schedule, some of whom work until midnight? So those two things are related. How are you encouraging staff and your teams to take their time off?
Well, it's kind of hard to encourage people to take time off now because there's really not much that they can do, you know. So a lot of people are sort of saving it up, you know, for the possibility that things will open up in the summer and they'll be able to take the trips that they've been hoping to. But in the meantime, we are definitely, I think, you know, encouraging managers, and we're doing a lot of manager training as well, which I haven't talked about. But you know, to the point of the previous question around managing by objectives, reminding managers of how to continue to be good managers and what that looks like now. One of those things is to look for signs of stress and burnout, and to proactively have their people take a day off or a couple days off, or you know, whatever the case may be. So those are just, you know, kind of ongoing just good management practices, you know, to remind managers to be on the lookout for. But I think it's tricky because to your point, Lydia, you know, people sometimes want flexibility, and that's more valuable to them than being told, you know, you have to do it a certain way. And I can totally relate to your working till midnight point, because I'm a night owl. So that works better for me than, you know, being up for a 7 a.m. call. So, you know, I don't necessarily want to assume that people have a certain pattern. And it was funny because in the beginning of this, of the working from home situation, there were some people who were really asking for and trying to put in place more structure. And so people came up with what they thought were great ideas, like, you know, let's do an hour a day when there's going to be no calls or meetings. And of course, I mean, you know, we're a global company. Hello, you know, like there's an hour when, you know. So, you know, I think people quickly realize that, okay, what probably is best is to be mindful of the fact that people will have different needs, and for managers to be great managers and to be able to flex according to their team's needs.
There's a third person that has a similar question, and that is, if you've changed company goals to accommodate and give permission to disconnect more easily, which you're answering, but also they say encouraging time off is helpful, but not so much when you come back to hundreds of email, almost counterintuitive. I don't know about you, but that has been my personal problem. I can barely walk away for an hour and there's just, you know, another 50 waiting for me. So how are you all dealing with that?
I can respond real briefly. So for us, you know, we're not changing team goals per se. The goals are still there, and we've always kind of, part of the ability to create flex work scenarios and remote work is having these, you know, we have OKRs on an annual basis, objective key results, and then we have monthly and quarterly KPIs, key performance indicators. And those don't change, right? You wherever you go, you can be working, you know, in Europe or Asia, or working from home, working at midnight or middle of the day. As long as those goals are clearly defined at the outset, and those goals and objectives are what are the measurement basis for how folks are doing, then, you know, the flexibility and the off time, you know, that becomes less an issue. It's, you know, when you're working, how well are you doing against what the goals have been set, you know, how well you're achieving those. So I think that element really provides that flexibility inherently, if you're very meaningful about that and intentional about that goal setting.
And this is Marion, I'll jump in as well. We've been asking our leaders as well as all of the employees, if you're having to start early or you're having to go late on a call, because we're a global organization as well, then we want you to adjust your schedule so if you were up till, you know, midnight dealing with a situation, we don't want you to start until 10 the next day. So we've been encouraging that type of flexibility. And to Dave's point, it's all about executing and getting the results that we need versus just being active. So we're going from activity to impact is what's really important when you're communicating these types of things to the team. The other thing is regarding the volume of emails. We've been encouraging people, really think about it. Is this necessary to be sending an email right now? Because the emails have gone up significantly. I have a little anxiety. I got up this morning and I was like, I'll do that after the webinar. But there were so many emails, but we are asking people to be conscious of the volume of emails that they're sending and really think, is this necessary to be sending an email, or could there be a quick call around this, or could we address this the next time that we are interacting? And I think being conscious of that has also been valuable for some.
Someone else want to add anything to that?
I can say, I mean, like similar to Luciana's point, like right now there, isn't a whole lot of reason to take paid, PTO, and what we've done is we actually amended our sick leave policy. So for individuals who've either contracted COVID or have had to self-quarantine, we're giving them paid sick time that does not, it doesn't come out of what they already have. So we want to make sure that, when people come back to work, that, they're not completely depleted. So that's been, one important aspect of this. And obviously people's vacation time is something people are not, really using so much these days. And we have had to, when it comes to, if you have to, if you have a job that doesn't, isn't compatible with teleworking, and, now that school is closed and you have to stay home, I mean, we are, asking people to take their paid time off, but we are, if people need advanced time, we're advancing time a lot more generously. We're also, letting people use, sometimes people have a lot of sick time, but we're letting them use that time for, staying home to take care of your kid, because we want them to have that flexibility, and also just kind of leaving also just that one, if the just option of, if there's just, none of this is working, we'll figure it out. We're telling our employees we'll find a way to figure it out. So, I think that's been very helpful. And so, that way when people come back, they can, take their vacations, and so, yeah, that's really all I had.
I just want to address the fact that some of you are writing in with more benefits related questions, and the forum here is about health and well-being. So benefits questions are not really related to the topic. So I'm going to try to stick to those questions that are more related to well-being. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll try to get to all of those. The other question that came up that's related, because we were talking about productivity before, is, do you have any thoughts on how to support employees with focus and productivity challenges during these times? And I think that's a really important one to address, because some people are struggling, both in terms of not having the output that they're used to having, and also probably being nervous about saying anything, because these are tough times, and you don't even know if you'll have a job if you confess perhaps that you're not meeting your goals. So how would you all address that question?
What we do is, well, our top company value, when we break down kind of the elements of our teamwork culture, is transparency. So we try to be very, very encouraging and supportive of folks sharing. So the counterpoint to that is respecting individuality, that we need to respect folks' issues. And so what we do is, number one, that's across the board, always trying to encourage that. But what we have been doing through COVID is as much crowdsourcing as possible. I kind of referenced it earlier, trying to get, everybody on the team to share what they're doing well, what's been working for them. and what the challenges are. And we do that on, sort of one-off requests to folks, but then we also talk about it. We have a regular, we call TTT, which is a weekly Tuesday, 10 o'clock touch base, which traditionally has been focused on, what am I doing this week? But it's been a lot more about, how am I doing more recently? And so that's kind of a platform to be able to discuss a little bit more about the issues and the challenges around productivity, distractions, focus. And then we also moved what was a monthly social hour every month after our monthly meeting to now a weekly social hour remotely. So folks get together every week, and it's more of a social interaction. We have different breakout rooms where people talk, and sometimes it's just fun stuff and game playing, but it's also oftentimes about work and the challenges and the issues that folks are facing personally. So I think, communication, crowdsourcing, letting folks know it's not only okay, but it's good to be transparent and share the issues you're dealing with.
And Dave, just I agree. Communication is just really key. And even before COVID, and we were just in the workplace. I mean, I've always encouraged my team. Any employee. And my door's always been open, and so we've always encouraged employees, if they feel like they're overwhelmed, or or they're struggling in some way, and they need help, to speak up. And so I think it depends on the division right now in this COVID time, but there are some divisions that are very active. Like we're having to, I have a testing division, and we have we have to bring on a lot of emergency responders to keep staffing levels where they need to be. And so there are people who are working very hard, and, we're encouraging, if someone's feeling overwhelmed, then, we want people to say, I can't, or, I'm overwhelmed because now I've got to teach my kids at school and deal with work. If they feel like they need some sort of, maybe we can spread the work, amongst other people. We can find a solution, but we don't want people to feel like they're unsupported, and we don't want people to feel uncomfortable about speaking up if they feel that they're struggling. And it's been the way I've been very lucky that even before this, when people have had issues, we've been able to always find some way to address employee issues. So it hasn't, that aspect hasn't changed, and we just continue to, again, communicate. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I would add to that the kind of communication that we're doing is also important, right? So one of the things is to share examples of teams that have not only stayed productive, but also sort of risen to the challenge, and are doing things that are helping others. So one example of that for us is we have a site in Puerto Rico, and one of the things that they do is they produce ink for our printers. And someone came up with a great idea to actually use the same manufacturing equipment that they have to produce hand sanitizers for local hospitals. And so we celebrated that story in our internal channels. It actually ended up going external as well. And they started producing for even other organizations, and beyond Puerto Rico, they actually are now producing hand sanitizers for our entire sales force at HP. But those kinds of things where you really see someone who's doing something great and you amplify it so that it inspires other people. So I would agree. I think communication with that intent to inspire. The other thing that we're doing is we're on a regular basis, we're putting out a calendar of events that we're sourcing. And I mentioned some of them earlier around the homeschooling, but we also have some very productivity focused sessions. So there's webinars around the neuroscience of crisis response and you know, what that does to your brain, and sort of how do you activate the right part of your brain so that, you know, you get out of defense mode and you know, you're able to actually be more productive and sort of to almost outsmart those mechanisms. So we've had some seminars on that have gotten really good reviews from people. We're doing a lot of stress management topics as well. So, you know, so the kinds of things that also help people to help themselves so that they can feel the agency and the ownership of that productivity. So it's not really something that's being done to them, but it's, you know, here's how you can become more enabled.
Slightly related to that. Oh, go ahead, Marion. Sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the things I've done personally with my team is sit down with everyone to prioritize the work, because there's always a lot of work to be done, but let's prioritize what we need to focus on right now during this time period to deliver on. And I think that has helped to relieve a lot of stress for my team personally. And then as an organization, we're offering like Coursera, Tignum, LinkedIn Learning. So we've given access not only to our employees, but also to their family members, to all of these platforms. And we're also, as leadership team, identifying certain courses that we found value in and creating a playlist that we're sharing across the organization for people to utilize, because there's so much information. So, but I think for me, prioritizing, sitting down and prioritizing proactively the work with each of my employees relieve a lot of stress.
So I think that answers Erin's question as well, because she was asking about adding extra layers of empathy and coaching and time given. So all of your strategies seem to fall into that zone. Another couple of related questions we had were about diversity and inclusion. One being, what types of D&I questions might you be asking on your pulse surveys? And another one is, how are you taking into account people's cultural differences now that you're working remotely? So, you know, that's wrapped into well-being as well. As, you know, are you still having those inclusive types of conversations? So feel free, anyone, to jump in with that.
Yeah, we just did a webinar on that yesterday. Actually, our chief diversity officer hosted a panel, and our CEO was part of the conversation. So so you know, it really signals to the company that this isn't something that goes away, right? On the contrary, it actually becomes even more important. And we promoted that along with those other activities that I was just telling you about in a calendar that we call HP Spirit, and it just sort of lays out, here's everything that's available. We sort of designated a day per week to various things. So Motivation Monday and Training Tuesday and Wellness Wednesday. And, you know, so we try to give that kind of programming the focus that it deserves. And so in this case, you know, it really did speak to the issue of diversity. And unfortunately, there's no day of the week that starts with D, but it still found its way into our calendar.
For us, we've been actually trying to support, especially through our employee resource groups, different employee segments. So when you look at the Asian community, there were some really horrible things that were happening at the beginning of this whole pandemic. So I reached out personally to the leaders of our Asian affinity groups to see how we could support. What were the challenges? Was anyone experiencing anything at the company? And so those types of conversations, and we actually just signed on as a sponsor to a newsletter that's going out, or a referendum from Ascend, one of the largest Asian American professional organizations in the country, in support of the community. I know you guys have seen the news when you look at the African American and Latino community and the impact of COVID. So we've been working with those two organizations to really try to talk about, how do we create a platform? How do we support? How do we create a conversation, as well as additional education? So we've been doing a lot of those types of things during this the whole pandemic. But I think from a broader, more general perspective, we've been keeping at the forefront of everything that we're doing the importance of maintaining our focus on an inclusive environment, not just a diverse environment, and what the needs are of individuals, regardless of their background. So we've been really focused on making sure that that maintains its place as a priority. And our CEO has talked about it, and all of our leaders are talking about it. Because what you focus on grows, and if we don't continue to focus on diversity and inclusion, we're going to start to lose ground, and this is not the time to lose that ground.
And I think
Is anyone else dealing with cultural issues? Dave, you talked about, Kintone is a Japanese company, and there has been a question about mask wearing, particularly for Asian employees, and the discriminatory environment that might surround that. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, a little bit. So we are a majority minority company. We're also about 50-50 male, female, so pretty diverse. And just by our nature, I guess. So, in terms of, face mask wearing, that was very standard in our office even before COVID. Folks, in Japan, if you're sick at all, you wear a face mask just out of, politeness to others that you don't, spread. So we always have visitors coming in from our headquarters throughout the year. Not anymore, but these last couple months. But prior to that, we'd always have 3, 4, 5 people in our office, and it's very common for folks to be wearing face masks. So internally, very sort of accepted, I guess, naturally. I think for us, adding to Marion's point, we're all about kind of individuals. And so what our recent survey was intended to do was to draw out each individual person's issues that they might have right now, regardless of, gender, race, any different aspect. And so it's always been for us just to try to address the individual concerns and needs, however diverse it is. And in that way, that's how inclusion works for us. In terms of the mask, we definitely had some threads going on our internal portal, about the concerns of things happening across the country. Thankfully, as far as I know, I don't think anyone in our organization has been a target of any of that kind of discrimination. But there definitely have been some threads sharing some of the things that were happening, and, be careful, so unfortunately, yeah.
And I would say for us, our EEO division, remains active, so that there's a place for, that still, there is a resource that still exists if people are experiencing anything. Luckily, I feel like, in general, people are bonding more, and that's actually a really positive change. And so I'm actually, thinking about the good things that are gonna, that can come out of this. I do feel like, people are learning how to work together differently. And so that's something that I think has been great. And our chief diversity officer, periodically sends out articles of interest and the importance of, diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And he's continuing to send things out to employees just to remind them that, eventually we're all gonna be back in the, we're gonna be back in the office, and, it's just something to continue to work on. And we were hoping to start some employee resource groups. I think, any kind of work that we can do in the, now to be able to launch that quicker, when we're back to, our workplace, is also another part of what we're trying to do to, be ready to launch some initiatives that, that we've been working on for a while.
Just one thing I wanted to add that I left out is around scouting and recruiting from a diversity perspective. And we're still hiring. All the companies are still hiring for essential roles, right? And so we don't want to lose sight. And this is one of the things that I've been driving home with leadership in our organization. We don't want to lose sight of ensuring that we have diversity at the table, in our interviewing panels, and in our candidate slates, even during these times, because the knee-jerk thing is, well, let's just get it done fast. And our focus is to get it done right. And we know more diverse organizations and teams deliver higher revenues, they're more innovative, and they're more responsive to customer needs. So that's the message that I'm constantly delivering. And I've been working with our talent acquisition team, as well as our business leaders, to not lose focus on ensuring that our scouting and recruiting has the diversity lens.
Well, if I could, I'd love to just piggyback on what Marion just said too. So you might not be surprised to hear that, state government isn't like the light that shines in everyone's eyes necessarily from a youth market perspective as a potential employer. And this is just such an interesting time because it's one of the first times that, having come from private sector, working in the government now for 2 years, it's one of the first times where I feel like we've actually got a little bit of clout here in some ways from a talent acquisition perspective and from a sourcing perspective, because the state has so many different jobs, opportunities, roles, positions. It's one of the places where you have unbelievable opportunities for career diversity and advancement. So to Marion's point about certainly we're not going to go on a general crusade of hiring and talent acquisition right now, but thinking about how we leverage, that just right point in time when you're ready to grow your operation again, to be grooming and sourcing the talent right now to give you the best candidates and the best diverse panel of candidates, and to be able to, really swoop in and do some hiring once the organization is ready to do it. So I've got my talent acquisition team poised and kind of, trying to warm people up and have a talent pool developing that we hope to be able to deploy on sometime soon in the future, which I hope will give us, and which we are planning, will give us, hopefully an even more diverse panel of employees and prospects and candidates in the future.
Yeah, that's great to have. We have to build those pipelines right now of that talent. Yeah, yep. That's great, Dan.
And I mean, actually, I hadn't thought about that, but thanks so much for the input, because now that's what I'm going to be working much harder on, because it hadn't really occurred to me. But because yes, we're not really, other than the frontline workers, we're hiring is kind of slowed down. But yeah, this whole idea of being prepared and building those pipelines now. I mean, that's such a great idea. Thank you so much for it.
Well, I'd say we'll be here all day, but we're going to have to wrap up very soon. One of the other things that I'm observing from your responses and through some of my reporting is that as this time seems to be increasing our empathy and understanding for the challenges that individuals are facing, I think that we may be also reaching an inflection point when it comes to unpaid labor, because now we have working parents both at home, both responsible for taking care of whatever in the house, and even those who don't have children are starting to see that there is oftentimes an imbalance with the unpaid labor. So I have to believe that there's hope in your recruiting efforts for non-traditional candidates, such as moms who have stepped off the career path for a while and were doing the bulk of the unpaid labor as their job, their sole job for years. So maybe, possibly, this will be something that will come out of this. We can reconvene next year and all discuss it. But that's all the time that we have questions for. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve, who will take us out.
Thanks, Lydia, and thank you to all the speakers. That was really a great conversation, really lively and engaging, and I appreciate that. Thanks again also to our sponsors, Kintone, Speakfully, Gympass, and to all of you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. So thanks everyone, and be well.
Thank you so much for joining. That has been our webinar, How to Manage Employee Health and Wellbeing During Stressful Times. Please join us next week, same time, 2 o'clock Eastern on Thursday, May 7th for our webinar, How to Measure and Benchmark Tricky Culture Risks. Thanks again.